Hello and welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg-Shaped, and we are on a series of Samurai pods. And if you're going to talk about Samurai, you got to talk about this man. What hasn't he done in the game of sevens? And the bit I love the most is the absolute brutal honesty that this man brings. He's well respected throughout the game, been a player, been a coach, contributed hugely to the magnificent Samurai International, and is ready for the Olympic Games. Having just been through the selection process and announcing the squad, it's now all eyes focused on the gold. So without any further ado, please welcome the one and the only Mr. Mike Friday.
Morning or afternoon. I'm not sure it's afternoon where you are. Morning where I am.
Yeah, all over the show. You have done a fair bit of jet setting in the last little while. I watched your Insta story and you started here, you jumped to there, you had a short one to there, then you went to the... I couldn't keep up with where you're going. Have you any idea where you are?
Well, I have now. I mean, the important thing, I'm in the United States. So that's the most important piece. But obviously this country is huge. So jumping from the East Coast down the South over to the West Coast is no kind of easy feat. As you know, getting planes in America is like getting trains and buses for us in England and Scotland. So yeah, it was an eventful start, getting down to watch some college sevens. They first college tournament they managed to get back on here after COVID, and then up to San Diego, our training base, where we've had an intense last month. And now I've managed to get a couple of days off and I'm up in Santa Monica. So life isn't so bad after all. But yeah, it's it's a fabulous country. It's a big country, and it's certainly eclectic.
How important is it for you to be at live sevens tournaments? Because surely you could be watching those online or on video. How important is it you're there in person?
Yeah, I think it's important to be seen, and I think it's important, if travel permitting, that we can get there, and that's half the issue sometimes in the USA is actually physically being able to get there. And we are lucky in this modern day that we can watch things on streaming and so forth. And, it's been such a long time since we've had any sort of pathway sevens for the USA going on. I just felt that I needed to be there and wanted to be there just to see these young men and ladies out there enjoying the game. And New Orleans isn't a bad place for that to happen. And, it's obviously the MLR is evolving as well in the country. So, Nola did a great job of putting on the CRCs.
And you've got that reputation. Is there an extra step in the players' bounce and preparation when they see you on the touchline? Do you think that adds something to it?
I'm not so sure whether that's happened or they just think the grumpy English bloke's about. I'm not really sure. Is it the chippy English bloke or is it the angry English bloke? I think like anything, it's for young players, whatever the country they're in, if they see that the top of the game is taking an interest, then they understand the pathway in order for them to try and achieve their dreams. And that's ultimately what these young men are trying to do. They're enjoying the game, but ultimately their aspirations are to play for their national team or get as high as they can. And none more so than in America, playing in the Olympics is a huge, huge thing. So, I think being within touching distance or being able to speak or see or eyeball somebody who has a say on that pathway is important, because you want to inspire and you want to, give these young men and ladies the opportunity to interact and understand what it's going to take if they do want to achieve their dreams. So I think it's an important piece. It's not the only piece, but I think it's an important piece.
It must be tough in a country that's so big. I mean, in the UK, Samurai play a tournament on the Friday night, the Saturday, the Sunday, and you can have seen 300 players in the space of a weekend. But in America, being so spread out, that must be a challenge. So you obviously have to be quite selective in where you go.
Yeah, we are selective on when we will when we're able to physically be there. Obviously, we can pick up a number of the streams, and ultimately, again, we also have talent ID coaches out there in the pathways looking for players and tracking players. The college system is great, and we've got some strong individuals there that can talent ID, as is the club sevens game. We're very fortunate, as I call him, the mad professor Howard Kent, who works tirelessly on the club national sevens in terms of trying to bring that stream online to ensure that we can see the players. And it is a very disparate environment here because of the vast size, and obviously every state is like a country in its own right. So it is a difficult task to try and bring everybody together. They culminate in 2 or 3 really big competitions through the year, and that's where we focus our physical presence. But then obviously we're working behind the scenes on the talent ID, with our scouts to try and identify potential athletes in the game. And that's before we even talk about those athletes that are not even in the game, that are, collegiate freaks. And that in itself is a challenge, trying to identify those that could cross over, possibly may be able to take up sevens at a later age, or as we've seen previously, guys like Nate Ebner, who were rugby players who then became American football players. And that's where the power of the invitation circuit comes. And let's just take Nate, for example. That's where we use Samurai Sevens to bring him back into rugby after the Super Bowl, to ensure that he was able to kind of land softly into a reintroduction to sevens. And we kind of try and find a ways and a means to try and help players develop or find their way to us.
It was amazing. I was in Hong Kong when Nate Ebner was there with Samurai, and you were around with the USA, and a Super Bowl winner, an absolute rock star. But at the Hong Kong Tens, he was just another rugby player that was trying to give his absolute best. How do the other players around Samurai cope with somebody like that coming in? Is he just another player?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of Samurai Sevens, is it's about bringing people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different environments, and then giving them a common purpose. And it is about being trying to compete and be the best rugby player you can. But more importantly, in the environment is about being a good person, being a good character, developing and nurturing and making yourself vulnerable amongst the group that you may have only just met, which are life skills, right? And, Nate Ebner is well-travelled and well understood and understands what's required to be successful at an elite sport like American football. But when he entered into the Samurai environment, because of his experiences, he didn't compromise his professionalism and in terms of as a player and what he required to get himself ready. But more importantly, he still molded himself into the Samurai environment, and the Samurai environment molded around him to allow him the best opportunity to achieve his goals, but by the same token, be a part of a team chasing a goal in itself. And, Nate thoroughly enjoyed the whole experience of meeting, rugby players and playing with rugby players from different backgrounds and different parts of the world, as well as that reintroduction into the game of rugby, and challenging him in what, as we know, is in the Hong Kong Tens, is a brutally difficult tournament to win. And fair play, they came close, very, very close that year. Sounds he doesn't like to talk about it, brings him out in a cold sweat. But it was right down to the wire.
Can't talk about Hong Kong in front of Terry. But Nate, when I met Nate there, it was one of those ones that made me laugh because he introduced himself to me as if I didn't know who he was. But that's one of those life skills, isn't it, about being grounded and being humble? Yeah, I mean, Nate is certainly both of those things. And he again he treats people how he wants to be treated, and he treats everybody in the same. Whether you're Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, or whether you're the 19-year-old kid that's on the Samurai team that happens to be in the same room as Nate Ebner. That's just how he is, and that's exactly how Samurai portrays its environment. It is an environment for all. You come in, you have to work hard, but you have to enjoy the whole experience and contribute and be selfless to the team environment. And I think that's the sort of thing that lights the fire in certainly players like Nate, but in most players, is that there's, dependent on who you are, if you're a player like Nate Ebner, you've got so much that you can transfer to these younger players so they understand what it is to be an athlete and how you can achieve your dreams. But more importantly, if
if you're a young player coming in, you actually get to rub shoulders and understand the environment and understand what it takes and what it will take to be successful if you have aspirations to play higher up, say on the international seven circuit. So it's a perfect passageway, a perfect gateway between the development pathway piece and the international game.
I've always loved your enthusiasm, and I can remember being at the Rec in one of the summer sevens tournaments, and you were there on the touchline for Samurai, and here you are sitting in a hotel in America preparing for the Olympics. You obviously have a huge appetite for it.
I enjoy the game, but I'm driven by making people better. I love that. I love watching players achieve their potential and allow them. And when I say achieve their potential, not just as a rugby player, but also help them achieve their potential as a person. Because I think if you create a better man or woman, you create a better rugby player. That goes hand in hand for me. And whether that's with the playing side or the coaching side, I think the one you're referring to down at the Rec was again. I think I was away on international duty or something like that, and Sansi needed help down at Bath.
It was the bat call to Giza.
Yeah, it was. I think John Brake was coaching them, and Breaking it was doing really good. But again, like anything, Sansi wanted him to have a positive experience. It was like, Giza, I need you to come down and do this. And I was like, okay, no problem, Terry, I'll come down. It's 2 days. It's 2 days, right? It's not 1 day, it's 2 days. So I'm on the way down. It's like, oh, by the way, Breakie's running late. You're going to have to coach the team the night before. And I'm like, you stitched me up again. He's like, no, I haven't. And like all things, I'll do anything for Terry every day of the week. And, that's what you do when you're part of the Samurai is the reality is you help each other out. There's a selfless trait that you put yourself out for the crew, as Terry has done since day one from '96 for so many players and so many coaches. So for me, it was about helping mentor and develop and Breakie, as well as in that instance, as well as helping the players achieve what they wanted to do. And I think we needed to win that tournament for Sansi to, I don't know whether it was to win the series or not. I can't remember. I think it was back in the early days of the Jesters Samurai tallies, and we managed to win that tournament, and they won it well. And the players had a positive experience. Breakie was outstanding, and that for me is again a big tick in the box. Is that winning and losing, is a bounce of a ball every now and then. But watching players develop and get better, and watching coaches develop and get better and grow in confidence, so that they can carry themselves as better human beings, is a huge part of the Samurai Sevens ethos and culture.
And you've been part of it since the beginning. How then have you got to this point? Because when you began, there wasn't this opportunity to be an Olympic sevens coach, and the chance of doing it for America. If you said that 25 years ago, people would have laughed at you and thought you were off your trolley. So what is it that's happened with you over that period of time?
I gotta say, I was probably off my trolley when we started this with Sansi 25 years ago. I mean, I was part of the we were talking earlier. It was an interesting kind of evolution about how the Samurai arrived. Obviously, Sansi and his brother used to sponsor the Wild Water Buffalo, East Anglia Motors, Terry and his brother, and I first came across them because I was the token English bloke amongst the 11 Welshies. So it's kind of role reversal, and I was abused by the likes of Kingsley Jones, Mikey Boys, Di Manley, Simon Enoch, all of these Welshies, Welsh mafia that we used to go to these tournaments. It was the most unlikely cocktail, but then obviously Sansi loved his sevens, and he created the Samurai Sevens, predominantly with a lot of us. It was a weird old mob: Welshies, me, a posh Scots bloke, Mark Appleson. Mental, but you would not think it would work. But the very fact that you had this common ethos of everybody was prepared to work hard, nobody had any egos, everybody had a personality, everybody was prepared to be vulnerable, everybody was prepared to be the butt of the joke, and it was back then very much kind of play hard in the morning, in the afternoon and certainly in the evening, and then you better be able to back it up the next day. Obviously, the world has changed, but the human element and the human value part has stayed very much the same, as has the mantra and the ethos of helping your brother, developing and ensuring that you're doing everything you can for the group, and you're prepared to make yourself selfless and vulnerable for the group. And that's kind of how Samurai Sevens evolved. And back then we weren't in the Olympics, you're right, but we were just good blokes going to great tournaments at weekends and having fun. And then I ended up, I was playing for England Sevens, and then I ended up getting into the coaching with England Sevens, and then I ended up becoming the head coach of England Sevens. And then that's when we started to reposition Samurai a little bit with the St George's Samurai alongside the main team, whereby then we would look at this kind of whole pathway development process, because there was this missing piece between playing invitation sevens, where you still had a lot of top class players playing the sevens as well as playing for their clubs, be it Premiership clubs. But you were missing out on these youngsters who were trying to introduce and use the game as the vehicle to bring them through in 15s. And that's where, Samurai probably led the way with the St George's Samurai, as it was called back then, which was a lot of young English guys, young Danny Kerr, young Ben Foden, young Topsy Ojo, young Tom Van Der. I mean, there are literally hundreds of guys that came through that system that have then progressed on. And that was nurtured and based more on English players. And then we kind of expanded that out. So, well, let's not contain it to them. Let's use guys from around the world. And then Titchins was interested in developing people like Scott Curry, Milky, Tim Mickelson, Sam Dixon, and the same with Kenya, young Collins Injera, Humphrey Kianga. The list goes on. And it all comes from word of mouth. It comes from, again, the values of the Samurai Sevens, and realizing and recognizing when you come on the Samurai Sevens, you have a positive experience and an enjoyable experience, but also that you are treated in the right way and given the right care, but also you're helped to develop your touring as well as your game and yourself. So it's I wouldn't say it was a huge strategic vision. I just think it evolved as it went along. And when you've got the likes of Terry Sands, who's hugely passionate, hugely driven, and hugely persuasive. I mean, he literally could sell ice to the Eskimos. It's ridiculous. Proper car salesman of the highest order. Then, you've got a good little recipe to succeed. And, if you treat people well, and treating people well is not, laden them with cash and free goods. The reality is you just treat them well, and you're clear on expectations and what you're responsible for and what Samurai is responsible for, then you get huge buy-in. And we had some great tours, some great experiences with lots of different people from around the world. I mean, what more could you want?
Who did you see before they were a name and you thought, this is it, this is the real deal?
What, purely playing for Samurai?
Purely playing for Samurai, who walked in the door and carved it up or did something and you thought, right, this is destined for the top?
It's probably Strettle then, if that's the case, because Dave Strettle was literally found on the fields of Amsterdam. And I remember Sandsy literally telling me, this kid from Roth, he's this, he's that. And I was with England at the time. I was like, yeah, whatever. And fair play, like Stretch delivered. And, Stretch is so down to earth again, honest northern lad. And literally he delivered. I mean, every time you put him in a position, every time you thought this might be a little bit too far for him, he adjusted and he surpassed it. And, he went on to be the player he was. And, I would hazard a guess, Stretch would say that the fields of Amsterdam were probably a big part of that, along with obviously, Dean Richards' stealing a march on realising when Harlequins were in that lower league and they played Rotherham, they made sure they signed him before anyone else saw him. So, back then it was weird, right? Because he was at Rotherham and it was unheard of that a player from a lower leagues would be in the England Sevens programme, and people couldn't understand why. And, fair play. I mean, Dean Richards has always been shrewd, but that was probably, that's right up there, because normally he's renowned for his prop shrewdness. But he delivered on that wing shrewdness as well. But so you're probably stretched. I mean, we've been so fortunate at Samurai to have so many young players through, and there are so many, what you would call global 15 stars as well now, especially from England, that will talk about their fond memories of playing with Samurai Sevens, be that Amsterdam, Lisbon, or even domestically. And likewise, if you go further afield with a lot of the Sevens boys that are going to be at the Olympics this year and were in 2016, they all would have probably put on a Samurai shirt and enjoyed that experience and wanted to experience it more over their kind of years.
And the stats for things like that are off the chart. 17 medal winners at the Olympics in 2016, over 70 in the Commonwealth Games, just all over the show. But what you were a coach for Samurai, and now you find yourself where you are. How has your coaching developed? You must be a very different coach from day one.
You're better off asking them that. Whether I am, I still think that I'm the angry, chopsy little Jack Russell. I think that's how they describe me. But yeah, no, I believe it or not, I have mellowed, and I'm. Coaching for me is all about communication and the flexibility of communication and being able to understand and see things through their eyes as well as your own, and molding myself around players so that I can get the best out of them. I think probably in your younger days you're driven by win-loss results and you're reactive rather than proactive, and realise that actually you have to be prepared to lose in order to win, which is tough for any rugby player. But ultimately, I see my role as trying to create an opportunity and an environment to allow the players to maximise their potential. And if I can do a good job of that, then I can make a lasting impression that they become a better person. Then I am more at ease with myself that we will probably win more than we will lose, and that we will probably achieve our potential collectively and individually. And I think it's that outlook, especially when you're coaching at an international level, which is a kind of what I would call a daily training environment, is a day on day, week on week process, which is very, very different to the Samurai Sevens kind of approach, which is all about you parachuting 12 players. How best do you bring them together? How best do you give them a common purpose to allow them to be able to communicate and get coherence in order to go out and perform the end of the week? And that's a very different mindset and skill set, which I enjoy because I think it's a different type of coaching experience, and there's a little bit more volatility in that in terms of the results, but obviously the rewards when you actually see that coherence translate onto the pitch is great to see, because you see it in their faces.
The opportunities that you've had through things like Samurai, the Beatles went to Germany and played in strip clubs for hours and hours and hours and refined their way. Ed Sheeran went to clubs and the Ginger Kid had to rap. You're at the top of the game coaching in sevens, but your time on task must be huge, not just in the bit that we see, but in being away with Samurai, being on the touchline at the Rec, being away overseas on these trips. How has that helped prepare you for something like the Sevens series and then going to an Olympics?
Well, yeah, I mean, it does prepare you. It is different. There is no doubt that the difference when you are on the circuit with Samurai. And I have these conversations with a lot of the coaches that have come through the Samurai and actually gone on to big things. You look at Tim Walsh, he worked with me at Samurai Sevens. He obviously won the gold with the women in 16. He's now with the men. Even people like Breakey, Tony Rokes, Henry Paul. There's a number of the coaches that are at the Olympics who have come through the Samurai Sevens coaching kind of mentoring or working with us in order to try and make them better, is that when you're with an invitation team, it is about coherence amongst the group, getting them on a common footing. You will not be able to solve every detail. It's about the big bits, and that's the big thing that people need to realize. You can't solve everything. You've got to leave the three-legged tent out there. It will still stand up, but it won't look pretty. And that's a big lesson for all coaches, because they all want to leave a four-legged tent out there. And you can't do it. Even in my job, when we've got a daily training environment, the three-legged tents out there are a hell of a lot. Sometimes because the players are putting the bloody legs back up. But, you know, that's how it is. And I think that's something that you only learn from doing. So all of these experiences that you can get, you know, on the one-day events, you know, even if it's at the Sunshine Sevens, or, you know, you're in the Super 7 series with Samurai and you've got to go to Bury St Edmunds or Maidenhead, or you're with the academy team. They're the types of experiences and how you adjust, and you're fleet of foot in mind and communication and managing and dealing with the players, as well as keeping it simple but effective, are critical, because they're the lessons to set you up as you progress through the coaching ladder, so to speak. I mean, the only thing that upsets me about this coaching ladder is ultimately, right, yeah, it's a little bit about being in the right place, having the right opportunity, but, you know, people need to look past results, and they need to look at the character of the coach. And actually, one, does he understand himself technically and tactically? Of course. But also his interpersonal skills in terms of how he's able to manage and communicate, to create players, nurture players, develop players, is just as critical, because technical and tactical sharpness can be learnt. The innate people skills are something that, you know, people sometimes either poo-poo or don't pay enough attention to. And that's where I think as well, you know, cutting your teeth on the invitation circuit or working with the Samurai Sevens teams at whatever level, yeah? The international team, the Barracudas, the Bulldogs, the women's, I think is paramount, and has a lot of value.
I love the journey you've been on to go from England Sevens at a time where that would have probably been one of the best programs or best resourced programs. You then go to Kenya. Like, I would love to know what the Kenyans made of Mike Friday, but it seems like it was pretty good because you were successful there. And now you're in America, which must be the best resource, but rugby is not known, not cultural yet, and you're playing a big part in that. So you've been involved in 3 national teams at the top of the game, but 3 massively different environments. What have you taken from those?
Yeah, I mean, the observations are interesting, because when I joined England, we were anything but a top program. We were like languishing at 5th or 6th in the world. We were, and we weren't taking it seriously. So we had to reposition the program and get it taken seriously. And that again is about the environment you're going to create and the expectations, so that the players want to come, but more importantly, so those clubs and those DORs recognize the value that we were giving to their younger players. So we end with that journey there, taking it from where it was to where it ended up when I left was a big journey. And by the time I left in 2006, we were delivering players for the Premiership, England A, as well as we had that core 7 specialists of Amor and Gollings and so forth. Kenya, wow. Now, where do we start there? What Kenya taught me about coaching is you don't need anything. Because when I sat on the side, I've told this story so many times, when I sat on the side of the pitch with a bag of balls and cones, burnt grass, and this was their high performance centre, and I literally just looked to the skies and it would say, what have you done here? What have you done? You are an absolute idiot, Mike, because my small man syndrome had been literally attacked for the last 6 years. I'd left rugby in 2006, gone into the city, was doing all the Sky media. Life was, you know, good. I could say what I wanted. be very direct about things, and I didn't have to coach a team. To then people saying, "What do you know about the game? You left the game 6 years," and I've been doing the Samurai Sevens for the last 6 years. You know, just keeping myself sharp. I just come back from Sri Lanka, done all that, but I was like, right, I'll do that Kenya job then, and then I sat there, and the boys came out 15 minutes late, like always, and it was like, what have you done here, you idiot? Like, you've bitten off more than you can chew here. You've talked yourself into something you can't deliver on. But what it made me do was it made me think about the game in the most basic form. Ultimately, the game is about the basics. It's about the basics of the game, but more importantly, it was about how do you get a connection between men in order that you can achieve impressive things. And that is where I really, 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 I'd always played around with communication skills and peoples and motivation and understanding personalities. Working with the Kenyan boys was an absolute dream. They are an amazing group of men, and some of them will still be playing in the Olympic Games. And we went on an amazing journey where, you know, the off-pitch stuff, we ain't got enough time. We ain't got enough time. It literally was ridiculous. I mean, anything that could happen in Kenya. But the players and their mindset, their abilities, if you protected them and you bought into them, what they gave back in return was immense. And I've got such strong friendships with so many of those players still, that even years after I left there, they'd come and play. You know, I coached a few of them again at the Samurai Sevens when we went to Kenya, and the Nairobi Sevens, which again was made a big thing that, as I'm known out there, Otoyo was coming home, and it was more about me. And I was like, whoa, it's nothing to do with me. It's all about the boys. And it was a great feeling, a great experience to coach and work with the likes of Oscar Uma again, Patrick, you know, and Felix Iyanga, and go against some of the good players that I trained with Kenya.
I've heard some of the Kenyans say, or I've read that they weren't treated the same on the circuit, that some of the teams looked down their nose at them. Did you experience that?
Well, before I got there, yeah. Let me tell you what we did with them physically. By the time we arrived in the Gold Coast for that tournament one, where I made them warm up in their vests, and I'm telling you, you have not seen rigs like this in a long while. Like, literally, the other teams looked at me and was like, "Oh my God, what have you created with this mob?" Because physically, they were. I mean, Andrew Amonde, William Backett, and Jera, they're big. They're big men. They're athletic men, but they're. I mean, they didn't carry much fat. You hear what I'm saying? I mean, it was ridiculous. And the issue we had was more of an understanding, and there's the fact that because, you know, they communicated in Swahili, their English is good, but it's very direct and blunt. So that can be misinterpreted by a lot of people, which didn't necessarily reflect well on them when they're trying to communicate on the pitch, which may mean that some of the calls could be unconsciously biased, not necessarily gone in the right way. And we certainly experienced that at times. But that's rugby. That's part of it. What you will get with the Kenyan boys is that they won't whinge or they won't moan. They'll get their head down and they get on with it the next time. They left that to me. And we had some interesting conversations with a lot of people off the pitch at World Rugby. But there's no malice or intent. It's just, unfortunately, that's the nature of the environment that we live in on the world circuit. And whether we like it or not, there were some traditional, what you call tier 1 nations. And then you have your, I don't like these sayings, tier 2, tier 3 nations, but that's the nature of the beast. And, you know, I'm a big believer in the underdog. That's what I had when I took over at England. That's certainly what I had when I took over at Kenya, to create and allow them to maximise their potential, which they did when I left them. They were sitting fourth in the world. We'd narrowly missed out on a World Cup final. Again, don't get me started on that one. Let that go, Mike. I've had the therapy. We're over it. And then, obviously, the challenge coming to the USA. Because, you know, it's interesting. You talk about resources. USA, like, we've got a great training centre, but our financial resource is practically non-existent, if I'm honest with you, in terms of what we get from our NGB, because they don't have a lot of money. So we get very little money, and I mean very little money. Most of our money comes from the USOPC, and I have part of my role at the moment is very much around fundraising. Philanthropy is a huge part of what I have to do with the USA Rugby. So we're trying to compete with some of these programs from established rugby nations that have significant dollar behind them, and we're, for want of a word, a tier, dare I say it, a tier 2 country, but in a tier 1 economy, which makes it very difficult. And we've got the issue of, like you said, of trying to have a game that we're trying to introduce into this country to take a hold. And the current boys at the moment are doing a fantastic job. But the common ground between the three is the underdog. I like to be the underdog, and I like to help people prove other people wrong and fulfill potential. I don't know why. I think it's a hype thing.
The job of a sevens coach, especially in the roles you've had, is different from a 15s coach. Warren Gatland has travelled to South Africa with a cast of thousands. He's got 30-odd players, almost 40 players. It's difficult to make connections with that number. You're travelling with 12 lads, 13 lads, support team of 2 or 3, but you're also seeing people at some of their most vulnerable. They're tired, they're fed up, they've lost, they've won, they're hungover, they're missing their family. You're in an airport where you've got to sit with them. How does that feed into what you're saying about the relationships and getting the best out of them?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's no hiding place. I mean, it is very much like I don't know. It's almost like a father-son relationship in terms of with all of them, and you ride the roller coaster with them, because if you for me, you have to emotionally invest in your players, and if you don't emotionally invest in them, then you're not going to get the best out of them, and they're not going to get the best out of you. But when you emotionally invest, that means you've got to ride the roller coaster, which means you've got to accept, like you do for your own children, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to upset you. They might even piss you off. And some of their behaviors and things like that at the times will be very, very good and will be very, very bad. But it's how you react and mentor them. I don't want to say discipline them, but how you constructively allow them to see that there's another way of doing things, and how you need to conduct yourself as a person if you want to get the best out of yourself, the people around you, and moving on in life. I think that is something that you need to embrace if you want to operate on the Seventh Circuit. And like I've said, there's no better place to do that than what you do if you operate with, what I had to do with Samurai Sevens on so many different occasions, be it with domestic teams or be it when we've travelled abroad internationally and there's been 6 or 7 different nations that have come together. It sets you up, it teaches you, it allows you to benefit from those experiences. And, a part of what I've done with a lot of our players when we're developing them is I will try and get them out to play in those types of tournaments with teams such as Samurai Sevens as well, because if you only have one set of experiences, you're not going to develop as a person. So the different types of experiences you can have, the more rounded you can become. And not all of those experiences will be positive, and sometimes that's a good thing as well. You need to have negative experiences, constructive experiences, along with those positive experiences to give you a kind of a perspective. So, I've had that as a coach. Those types of experiences I've had, say, with Samurai Sevens have enabled me to transfer and learn things internationally. And likewise, I encourage and want that for players. And I think, that's the beauty of sevens, that you can have those interactions and those relationships with players, which are more difficult to do, as you say, on a 40-man tour with 12, 15 staff. It is far more intimate, and likewise as well, you've also got to educate and teach these players that you need to build relationships that are good and solid for life with the other teams. because unlike international 15s, there's 16 teams all staying in the same hotel, all having dinner and lunch together. You might draw battle lines on Saturday and Sunday. That's fine, but having the perspective and the ability to then rub those lines out afterwards and have effective relationships and enjoy the company and learn from others is critical for you to develop as a person.
Yeah, having lived in Hong Kong, I used to love that roadshow aspect to it, where you just all in the same hotel, sitting having a coffee, going for a walk with each other. Who do you, or over the time that you've been on the circuit, who did you enjoy catching up with? Who did you think, right, there's somebody that I'm going to spend an hour with over a coffee and I'm going to be better having had that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like and I think this is me as an older coach, right? When you're a younger coach, when I first got in, I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody. That's how I was. I remember that first year with England because I think that you're still in that kind of competitive mode. When since it was my last year with England when I knew I was finishing, I was going to the city, and I had a really good sit down with Titch, and Gordon is the iconic man of Sevens, a bit like Serevi is from a playing perspective. And, Titch is never one to give out compliments easily. And he was very complimentary when I was leaving. But by the same token, I was like, I wish I'd spent more time with you. Just not forget the rugby bit, just in terms of his life experiences and the things that he'd been through, in his workplace. And when I came back with Kenya, I made a conscious effort to ensure that I interacted with, not just people like Gordon, who I kind of reconnected with, but also ensured like the younger guys, like obviously my former England captain Amor was going to be coming back into the fold. So, I love catching up with Titchins. I have great conversations with Neil Powell. It's interesting. I had a fiery starting relationship with Santiago Gomez Cora, but now we've got a really strong relationship because we're very similar. So you got a fiery English bloke, you got a fiery Argentinian, and we clashed to start with. But now you have perspective. You find each other and you're able to realise and recognise. So I have fantastic conversations with all of the coaches now on the side. Well, I think I do. They may say otherwise, thinking about that. But I just think one thing I would change is I wouldn't have been like I was at the start. I would have been probably a little bit more open to having those conversations. And I think sometimes you've got to be able to draw the lines on competitiveness and realise that actually there's a time and a place. When it's all said and done, then we're all trying to get better for the next one. And it's very similar on the invitation circuit. You think about the tournaments at Amsterdam and things like that, where everybody's out and about, right, in the evenings, and it should be friendly rivalry. I mean, maybe a bit of stitch up in some of the pubs, maybe. I don't know. That could be an idea, but come match time, you can draw the lines of 14 minutes, but then just see it for what it is. Somebody wins, somebody loses. But if you've all done the best you can do, then you've got to have positive experiences and enjoy the company and the friendships that this game allows us to have. And I think that's the special thing about Rugby Sevens, is that you can have such effective, special relationships. And it's a big family around the world that wherever you go, you end up bumping into somebody that you've played or you've met or you've seen at a previous tournament.
And that's a mature view to have. So you don't think you would have had that at the beginning? It
would
have been about winning.
I definitely didn't have that at the beginning, Bruce. I would say I would probably say I got wrapped up in the win-lose just at all costs with the teams at times. You bring your head up some of the time, but it's where it's being able to bring your head up when you don't want to bring your head up. I think that's the thing that you learn with maturity, and it's something that I would probably share with my younger self. Whether my younger self would actually listen is another thing, and that's a point, because that's a skill set in itself as a coach now. Is you've got to think about how you position and say things so that they will listen, because it's as much your fault as their fault if they're not listening, because you're obviously not saying it in the right way, or you've not got the connection that you need in order for them to consider that. That comes back to that flexibility of communication, which is, I do think there's innate ability in that, but I think there's also a huge piece that you can learn and improve and nurture. It's a bit like natural talent, right? You can have all the natural talent in the world, but if you don't nurture and develop it, then you won't maximize or fulfill it. And likewise, somebody who hasn't got that amount of natural talent can maximize themselves in a different way. And it's just whether or not he surpasses or not, really. So it's an important lesson.
Mike, on the pods that I've done, there's been moments where I've said to people, I want you to come to some staff rooms in schools, some changing rooms, and tell them that bit of the story, that it's as much your fault as it is their fault if they're not listening. That is gold and should be in every teacher training, every coaching course. That should be there.
Yeah, well, yeah. I just don't, like I said, I don't know who was talking to me when I was a younger bloke, but I obviously wasn't listening. But, I think, like I say, it's not a criticism either, because it just, sometimes it takes perseverance. And, I think back, the hardest thing I've ever had to do is coach kids. Like coaching my sons and their age groups was the hardest thing, because obviously I've got to tailor my language, always a difficult thing. As well as I've got to think about my tone. For once, I've got to think about my body position, because I'm actually taller than one of them, and ensuring that I get the connection I want with them, as well as get the positive outcome. And I think, again, another big experience for me was coaching kids, because it does make you think about the game differently and think about your communication strategies, because the game that you think is so simple is so complex to them, and you've got to make it both easy to understand but also enjoy. And then that again takes you full circle, because if you can do that higher up the tree with the more serious players, then great. Of course, I'm all for enjoyment at the top end of the game. There's a difference between enjoyment and fun, but don't get me started on that.
Amen.
But and there's a place for fun, but not necessarily in my session. It can be at the end of the session, lads, but it's not instead of the session. We can have an enjoyable session, and we can still work hard. But all of those kind of little lessons where I think sometimes coaches just misunderstand the environment they're in. Understand the person or the people you're with. Understand the goal, the mission, and then enjoy the journey. And be prepared to get it wrong, because I've got a great, one of the big sayings I say to all the players, and I am a great advocate of this because I do it a lot. You've got to get it wrong to get it right. And that's tough, but that's the reality.
When have you had a moment away from Instagram, away from World Rugby TV, and it might not even be with a player that was in your squad, and you don't have to say who it is, but I would love to know. I reckon what I know about you and what I've heard you say, there will have been moments where you've gone up to someone and said, listen, son, what about trying this? Or well done for that. Or I reckon Mike Friday's put his arm around somebody, didn't have to, and it had an impact. Now, I don't know if you know the impact it had on them, but maybe you can tell me about the impact it had on you.
Oh, true. I mean, I am a quite, I don't know, I can't think of an example. All I can tell you is the feeling it gives me. Is that, I am all about, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm highly competitive. And I know. I drive, and the boy, I drive standards, there's non-negotiables for me. And I'll drive standards on the pitch and off the pitch, but I am about the human values and things like that. But most of the times I've had to put arms around people are sometimes not necessarily about rugby stuff. It's about other stuff that's going on in their in life, and just the sense and the relief when you put that arm around and you have the conversations like, look, it doesn't matter what you've done or we can work through this, but I can't help you if you're not prepared to share with me what's troubling you or what's affecting you from being you. So getting that feeling of seeing the relief or the kind of the way that they relax when they actually tell you, they get it off their chest, and ensuring that you react in the right way, and then you see their lift is huge for me, because that's the moment for me in my gut where I like, right, I see we're onto something here now. Let's see where this goes. And I've seen that with players who sometimes it's not been rugby stuff that's troubling them. Now, again, as a coach, you've got to be careful because of you don't want to get involved in the transference of that and things like that. And you've got to realise as a coach, you can't solve every problem, which is something that a lot of coaches, including me, want to do. But by the same token, if you can, a problem shared is a problem halved, and you can give objective advice or suggestions that they could consider, or even just be there to listen, to see that relief come through on their faces, and then what they do thereafter, and give those positive encouragements or those words of constructive criticism to keep them on that pathway is critical. I've had that with a couple of guys who've had troubles with their studies, and one of them has achieved and done it, and he without giving names away, he came in and he's like, he thanked me by text, and the most important thing for me, he said, my mum's so proud that I've done this. And I was like, all I wrote back was bingo. And it was like, there you go, my man. I said, that's what life's about, because the person that you are cares about you the most, or you care about most, has verbalized something that we knew already, but it's that affirmation. They're the little moments that are huge for me, because I am all about molding myself around people and trying to make them the best version of themselves. And you know, that's got nothing to do with win or loss, sadly.
No, I love it, because that is a win. It's just not on the league table, unfortunately. Yeah. Who does that for Mike Friday? Who's who puts their arm? Does Terry put his arm around you? Who put his boot up your backside? Probably.
Wow. No, I'm very lucky. You know, I'm very fortunate in I've got a strong support network around me that keep me. You know, again, I can be quite vivacious, as we know. So I've got that. They keep me grounded. I mean, my sons keep me grounded as well. You know, I mean, that I do anything and everything for them, but by the same token, you know, that gives me perspective on what's important in life. And you know, there's at times, sometimes I forget that as well, you know, because you get caught up in the battles and the competition. But, you know, my parents are very supportive. My mum is, I mean, very direct with me. Let's just put it that way. She's from HR. So that's where I get a lot of my communication stuff. But, you know, you need those people that will make you look in the mirror. And my mother and father, mum and dad, certainly make me do that. So I'm very, very fortunate with them to keep me kind of where I need to be.
You obviously love what you do. How much of your job, so you've spoken about the emotional connection, within that must be storytelling. And I've loved listening to you. We've been talking for a while, and I love listening to you. How conscious are you of you being a storyteller?
Well, I don't know. I try and bring mine are either experiences or experiences that I've heard. And again, I try and personalize it in terms of you've got to be able to laugh at yourself as well, you know, and you've got to be able to recognize your weaknesses and your faults, and not be afraid to share that, you know, because I think that allows you to create connection. I think if you show vulnerability, as well as at times where you need to show strong leadership and come up with a plan and strategic vision to take us forward, and then emotionally try and bring everybody with you and ensure that they feel the best version of themselves, because confidence is also hugely important with direction if you want to be successful, along with resilience and a strong work ethic. So Yeah, I'll use a bit of storytelling. They're more kind of experiences as well, but it's a little bit of anecdotal stuff. But it's also coupled with the humour and serious talks as well. I try and pitch the situation and understand what's required, and then adjust accordingly. But try and remain authentic with that. Right, I'm still me, but I try and work out whether is this a time to be serious, or is this a time to chuck something in or not? And again, like always, sometimes I've chucked a couple in, I'm like, oh, that didn't go down well. And then you are backtracking a little bit. But I think the times I tell you the times where I've gone into a couple of things where, you're a bit nervous because I don't know them and they don't know me. So I immediately think, what do they want me to be? And that's when I get caught up and I get things wrong. So I've gone into a couple of presentations and I've tried to deliver, and when it just gone totally wrong, and then I just start shrinking inside. I'm like, oh, and then I just want to get off, and I've got off and I've gone, do you know what? Your problem was you didn't go out there and be you. You went out there and tried to be something that you thought they wanted to be, and the reality is, if they didn't want you, then you shouldn't have been here anyway. Again, I've had those pep talks so many times. I still haven't nailed it because I still fall over at various times when I've done that, especially when it's outside of my comfort zone. In other kind of environments. Be it in a corporate environment. And the worst thing is, I actually come from a corporate background, but I was molded around building teams in the business world. But there's still times where you doubt yourself, and then that stops you being you. And that would be, again, my little pep talk every time I try and have to do things like this. Like, you got to be yourself. You know your stuff. You know what you're delivering. Go out there and deliver it in your way. Read the audience. Understand who you're talking to. Even if you've never met them before, you've got to work that out on the fly. And then go for it.
I love it. So there's a question I'm desperate keen to ask you. Is Sevens an end in itself, or is Sevens to develop?
I think it depends who you are, because I think what Sevens is something for all men. I think you can have your seven specialists. I think that is the case, but I also think Sevens is an opportunity for you to develop as a rugby player and as a person for whatever your end goal may be. And your end goal may be to be the best Sevens player in the world, or be a Sevens specialist like Sarevi or like Simon Amor was for England. Or it could be to use it as your development, like we've seen with Caleb Clark in New Zealand most recently, or in my time, especially one of the ones, Matthew Tate. I think what we need to realise and understand in the modern world of Sevens is, unlike the old days where you could come in and out, I think people have to take a bit of a strategic view on this. Is that if you're going to use Sevens as a pathway to a greater thing, i.e., let's just say international 15s, then you need to give the player the best opportunity to succeed. That's not in and out. That's give him a concerted, concentrated period of 12 to 18 months to experience everything that this game can bring and develop in you, both on the pitch, which is huge in terms of the core skills and decision-making under the microscope, as well as what it takes to be a good human being when you travel the world, or when you get to interact with all these different cultures around the world, and carry yourself as a person, and then see how that translates back into the world after Sevens, if that's what that player decides. I think it's a great late development tool as well. I look at what's going on in the rugby world at the moment, and all of those disgruntled 18-year-olds that seem to be discarded by academies, going to university, experiencing that, again, another form of life, meet and talk to people that think more about other things apart from rugby, always a good thing. And use the Sevens through the university model to create that late development pathway for those guys that can filter in. I mean, that's what we've seen with, Rory McConaughey. That's what we've seen. Harry Glover, who's going to the Olympics, I think will join Stade Francais afterwards. Will Muir, we've seen that with Don Brandt in the 15s. So I think Sevens can be all things for all men. You know, I remember Don Brandt played for Samurai Sevens Academy along with Tommy O'Flaherty, and they were going at it in the Prem final last week. And you know, we've got great pictures of those guys using this as part of their journey. So it's a critical part of the rugby pathway and the rugby ecosystem, and I think it needs the respect at all levels to allow it to succeed. And I think joining the pathways between the club game and the international game is critical. And I think that's where Samurai Sevens can be a huge catalyst in that it allows that ecosystem to be continuous.
I love it. That is a brilliant answer. I love that. So we're wrapping up now, Mike, because I've had you for such a long time and I've absolutely loved it. So some quick fire ones, and I do think Fields of Amsterdam has to be the title of your autobiography. I think that would be a cracker. So in all your time with Samurai, who did you most enjoy playing alongside? One player.
Mikey Boys.
Mikey Boys.
He was shorter than me.
Which player have you most enjoyed coaching through Samurai? Which player gave you the most? Pick your favorite kid. Go for it.
My favorite. I'll tell you, I'm going to go for just because I'm going to go for Mark Bright.
Oh, yes.
It took me ages to get this bloke, and I was trying to get him for ages. Right, he was at Red Roof, and I was saying, Sandsy, we need to get him. And when Sandsy got him, he's like, I've got him. One of mine, isn't he? He's one of mine. I'm like, mate, I told you about this kid. I told you about this guy. I told you about this guy ages ago. He's one of mine. And that's Sansy's quote. Anybody that comes with one of mine, that is. But yeah, Brighty, because he defies all logic.
He defies all class. Logic. He's still going. He's still going.
He's still on Red Diesel. I think it's not even illegal. But yeah, he mixed it with the boys when we won Twickenham, you know, with all the international stars. I released him to go and play for England when he defied all the. He defies a lot of logic, that bloke. And they're right, he's still going.
Quality,
still going.
Absolute quality guy. Where's the best place you've been? What's the Sevens tournament that for you is the one red mark on the cat? You get your new calendar January 1st. The Sevens tournament you mark on
for Samurai.
For Samurai,
Amsterdam, my man.
Amsterdam.
Fields of dreams. Drink and sink. The Fields of Amsterdam. The stories when I had played in the late 90s. I've got some terrible stories which are not good for the professional modern game. And you know, Samurai Sevens has moved on in terms of the way we operate and things like that. But drink and sink and as what we would call our clubhouse has remained consistent. And yeah, it's a fantastic event. For me, it typifies everything that is good about Samurai Sevens.
Yeah, the birthplace. And if you had to distill Samurai Sevens down into sentence or a memory, what would it be?
What would it be? For me, it's family. It's family from around the world.
Yeah, and you're the dad to quite a lot of them, I reckon.
Well, I'd rather go Big Brother, because if you got Sandy involved, who's basically the grizzly bear, I could be the bear keeper. I don't know.
I love it, Mike. I really appreciate you giving up your time. All the best for the Olympics. We'll all be watching. It's just going to be superb. Are you able to tell us what you're aiming for?
Yeah, we're aiming for gold. That's the aim. But I think we have to be honest here as well. Is that like this team, this tournament, 12 teams, like anybody on any given Sunday can win. 2016 was ridiculous in terms of the results, and literally every game had an effect on another game. I just think with the year we've had, the adversity, the 12, 15 months without series, everybody's going to be a little bit undercooked. It's going to be very unpredictable. But, you know, if you said to me, do we have a chance? Absolutely. We've got a very, very good chance. But probably if you spoke to the other 11 coaches, they would all say the same as well.
Awesome, Mike. I can't wait to see how it unfolds. All the very best. Stay healthy, and I hope it goes very, very well for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute class. You got to love the guy. You got to love his enthusiasm, and a man who is non-stop traveling. How he knows what day it is, I've no idea. I think he's going to go very, very well in the Olympics, and a man who has died in the wool samurai. He's got stories and stories and stories, and he's had an impact on so many players and coaches, and the future is very bright for Samurai when they've got people like Mike Friday involved. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, you can catch it on Apple, on Acast, and on Spotify. You can watch on Facebook and YouTube, and I very much look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. My name is Bruce Aitchison, and my happiness is egg-shaped.